The story begins with a gruesome scene inside a small-town diner. Blood covers the floor, and lifeless bodies lie scattered. Amid the chaos, a frightened man dials 911, reporting the horrific scene. His voice shakes as he mentions that his friend Nancy is badly hurt. When the operator asks for his name, he quietly responds, "Jake Collins." We then jump back to the day before these tragic events. Nancy, the main character, is shown relieving herself in a field. She heads back to her car and checks a pregnancy test. It's positive. Not long after, she meets her closest friend Tabitha and shares the news. When asked about the baby's father, Nancy brushes it off, saying she's not sure who it is, admitting she's been with several guys lately. She confesses she'll likely terminate the pregnancy, fearing her strict father's reaction if he ever finds out. Later, dressed in her waitress uniform, Nancy is on her way to work when her car breaks down. Unable to fix it, she starts walking. Along the road, she runs into Bobby, a co-worker. Nancy tells him she needs to get there early because the manager has to open up the place. Bobby offers her a ride on his bike, and together they head off toward the diner. They arrive at the family-run diner, where Nancy's father, Edward, also happens to be the owner. He's not happy to see her late and reminds her that being the manager means setting a good example. He informs her she's assigned to work the late-night shift with another employee, Jake. Nancy objects, calling Jake strange, and asks if Bobby can stay instead. But her father refuses. He says he can't afford to pay Bobby extra hours and defends Jake as someone he fully trusts. Nancy is clearly annoyed, but doesn't push it further. As she begins her shift, Nancy vents her frustration to Bobby, explaining she's stuck working with Jake. Bobby kindly offers to stay behind, even if he won't get paid. It's obvious he has feelings for Nancy, though she doesn't really return the affection. Soon after, Nancy suddenly feels sick and hurries to the back, throwing up. Jake, who works in the kitchen, notices and casually asks if she's pregnant. Before she can answer, Edward walks in and demands to know what's going on. Jake quickly covers for her, blaming it on spoiled meat in the fridge. He then wishes Edward luck on his upcoming date. Later that day, another worker, Pete, accidentally spills water on the floor. Nancy tells him it's fine, but just then, a group of rowdy teenagers on mopeds pulls up outside. They start causing trouble, and Nancy storms out to confront them. Instead of backing off, the boys insult her and even toss a dead animal at her. Furious, she orders them to leave. As she heads back inside, she nearly slips on the wet floor and snaps at Pete, forgetting that he has Down syndrome. Jake, who is Pete's brother, steps in and defends him. Things escalate when the same group of teenagers re-enters the diner wearing creepy masks. Nancy tells them to leave, but they refuse and sit down, placing the dead animal on the table like it's some kind of joke. Nancy pretends to call the police, though Jake quickly realizes the call isn't real. Despite the bluff, the teens get nervous and exit, but not before one of them warns Nancy that they'll return later. As tension builds, Nancy gathers the team: Bobby, Pete, Jake, Jake's friend Coop, and another staff member. She reminds them that even though she's younger, she's their manager and expects to be treated with respect. Jake mocks her, claiming she only got the job because of her father. That comment crosses the line. Angry, Nancy fires him on the spot. Jake argues she doesn't have the authority, but Nancy holds firm, and he walks out. After that, Bobby continues hovering around Nancy, checking on her and offering to stay for the night shift now that Jake is gone. But Nancy, clearly on edge, lashes out at him in front of customers. She tells him he's a good guy, but insists he'll never have a chance with her. Her words sting, and Bobby walks away. As night falls, the regular shift ends. One by one, the other employees leave. Nancy says goodbye to Bobby, though the tension between them lingers. He's clearly still hurt by what she said earlier. As night settles in, she's left completely alone in the diner. Hoping to shake off the stress, she phones her father to explain that she fired Jake for being disrespectful. Edward isn't impressed by her decision and tells her they'll discuss it in the morning. After hanging up, Nancy tries to lighten the mood by blasting music and switching on some colorful lights inside the diner. She starts dancing around, enjoying the moment like no one's watching. But someone is, outside, hidden in the shadows. A figure silently observes her. Just as things seem playful, Nancy's stomach turns again. She barely manages to hold it together before throwing up and making a mess on the floor. As she cleans up with a mop, a sudden loud banging on the diner's walls breaks the silence. Her heart races. The masked teens from earlier have returned. Trying to stay calm, Nancy uses the speaker system to warn them, threatening to call the police again. This time, though, they're not scared off. Her bluff has no effect. In a panic, she locks all the doors and grabs the phone to make a real emergency call. She pleads with the operator, describing the situation in detail, but is told that no officers are immediately available. Even worse, the call drops unexpectedly. Nancy is now on her own. The attackers grow more aggressive, trying to break in. She grabs a knife for protection, and while trying to hide, she comes across the animal carcass she had thrown earlier. The lights also cut off, sending Nancy into a state of panic. She desperately searches for her phone in her bag, but can't find it. Suddenly, footsteps approach her from behind. But just then, flashing red and blue lights fill the windows. A sheriff arrives, and Nancy hurries to let him inside. She's clearly shaken, explaining how she was harassed and how they even cut the power. As she talks, the lights flicker back on. The sheriff looks around but finds no trace of the attackers. He radios the station and reports what Nancy told him, guessing the teens ran off when they saw his car. He says he'll stay a while to keep an eye on things. Nancy serves him a coffee, but she's clearly uncomfortable. He seems more interested in checking her out than doing his job. As she retells everything, she mentions the group had mopes. That word suddenly gets the sheriff's attention. He goes pale and quickly escorts her outside to his car. There, he shares something horrifying. He just came from a crime scene where multiple people were slaughtered. Witnesses said the suspects fled on mopeds. Before he can say more,
Go, go, go!
Nancy bolts and runs back inside. She locks herself in the diner's storage room, trembling as she peeks through the small window. To her horror, she sees the sheriff being savagely beaten by one of the masked teens. She also notices another figure lurking outside, sending chills down her spine. Just then, Bobby reappears outside the diner. Relieved but shaken, Nancy rushes to let him in. She borrows his phone to try calling her dad, but there's no answer. Suddenly, they hear someone entering the diner. The two hide in the kitchen, but Bobby accidentally makes a sound. The intruders hear it. Bobby takes off running, drawing their attention. Nancy stays hidden, using Bobby's phone to send a desperate message to Tabitha, begging her to come to the diner right away. Before she can react further, a masked figure grabs her. Bobby has also been caught. They're both tied up with duct tape and forced into a disturbing situation, made to kiss against their will. Nancy resists. One of the attackers drags her to the back, behaving in a creepy and threatening way. But as he gets close, Nancy finds her chance. She breaks free and stabs him, managing to escape. Outside in the dark, she's met by another masked figure. Without thinking, she plunges her knife into him. But then, an awful realization. It's Pete. He collapses, and from the diner, others rush out to help him, Bobby among them. One of the attackers removes his mask. It's Coop. Nancy's face drops. The people tormenting her this whole time were her co-workers. The movie cuts to an earlier moment. After Nancy fired Jake, he begged her to reconsider. He explained that he needed the job, he couldn't afford his medications, and was falling behind on bills. But Nancy coldly shut him down, saying he should have thought about that before disrespecting her. Left with no choice, Jake walked out of the diner. We later see him sitting alone in his car, seething. He tries calling relatives for help, asking for money. But one by one, they turn him down. His situation grows more desperate by the second. After their shift ends, Jake and Pete drive off together, making a stop at a shady dealer's house. Jake demands his usual fix, but the dealer won't budge without payment. Without hesitation, Jake pulls out a gun and threatens him, forcing the dealer to hand over the drugs. Back in the car, Jake gets high, mumbling about how the drugs numb the pain from his past. He confides in Pete, saying he once had big dreams for the diner, plans he never got to share with Edward. Now, all of it feels pointless. He's still fuming over how easily Nancy threw him out like trash. As they drive, Jake spots the same group of teenage troublemakers hanging around a bonfire. He tells Pete to stop the car. The two approach the teens, who recognize them from earlier. Jake casually joins their conversation, pretending to be friendly, until his tone shifts. He starts blaming them for the events that led to him getting fired. One of the teens mouths off, and Jake doesn't hesitate. He stabs the boy in the gut. He then brandishes the gun, forcing the remaining teens to kneel. Handing the weapon to Pete, he instructs him to shoot if any of them move. Country music blasts from the car as Jake cruelly forces the terrified boys to dance. When one of them resists, Jake demands that Pete shoot him. Pete can't bring himself to do it, so Jake pulls the trigger himself, only to find the gun empty. Furious, Jake snaps and strangles the boy to death. Afterward, Pete sobs in the car, horrified by what just happened. But Jake lashes out at him, blaming him for the mess. In a rage, he tosses Pete out, throws a mask at him, and tells him to wait at the diner for further instructions. Elsewhere, Coop and Bobby are hanging out, drinking and chatting. Bobby opens up about his feelings for Nancy. Their conversation is cut short when Jake, now wearing a creepy mask, jumps out and scares them. He shows off a bunch of mopeds, saying he and Pete borrowed them from the same teens who've been harassing the diner. Meanwhile, Pete arrives at the diner and quietly watches Nancy talking on the phone with her father. At the same time, Jake gives the others masks and pitches an idea, a prank to mess with Nancy. Soon, all four, Jake, Coop, Bobby, and Pete, show up at the diner and begin banging on the windows and walls to frighten her. When they see Nancy attempting to call the police, Bobby starts to get cold feet. He thinks they've gone too far. But Jake insists she's bluffing like before and ups the ante by cutting the lights. Once the sheriff arrives, the group scrambles into hiding. Jake sends Coop and Pete to circle around on the mopeds and wait for his signal. As the sheriff leads Nancy outside, Jake gives the cue. Coop revs the engine, creating a distraction that Jake uses to ambush the officer. Nancy manages to escape, while Jake beats the sheriff to death. Watching in horror, Bobby decides he's done. He removes his mask and pretends to arrive late on his bike, allowing Nancy to let him inside. Back outside, Coop is shaken by the murder, but Jake tells him it's too late to back out. His fingerprints are everywhere. If they don't take out Nancy and Bobby, they're all going down. Back in the present, Nancy is shaken by the truth. These weren't strangers. They were people she worked with every day. While the others rush to tend to the bleeding Pete, Nancy uses the distraction to slip away unnoticed. She's drawn to the dumpster where the rotting meat from earlier lies, sparking an idea. Inside, Jake is growing increasingly unhinged, pressuring Coop to find Nancy or face the consequences. Meanwhile, Bobby spots the sheriff's car keys and suddenly lunges at Jake in an act of desperation. At that moment, Edward leaves a voicemail for Jake. He tells him not to take Nancy's actions to heart and promises he still has a place at the diner. But the message comes far too late. Coop eventually tracks Nancy down in the kitchen and attacks, but she fights back fiercely. She shoves him toward the deep fryer, then lands a brutal blow that knocks him out cold. Nancy escapes again, this time with blood and adrenaline pumping. Unfortunately, her relief doesn't last. Jake has managed to overpower Bobby, and this time, he finishes the job, stabbing him fatally. He enters the kitchen and finds Coop unresponsive on the floor. Nancy finds Bobby barely clinging to life, lying in a pool of blood. With his final ounce of strength, he shakily offers her the sheriff's car keys. All of a sudden, Tabitha shows up at the diner, but seeing the massacre, she gets horrified and immediately leaves. Seizing the chance, Nancy dashes downstairs, with Jake close behind. He storms into the office, but Nancy has vanished, and then... She makes a run for the front door, but Jake appears out of nowhere and drives a knife into her back. Morning light begins to creep through the windows as he drags her bleeding body inside and stabs her several more times in the abdomen. With sick satisfaction, he places a sheriff's badge sticker on her chest before disappearing into the sunrise. While driving away, Jake calmly calls 911, reporting a brutal attack at the diner, carefully leaving out that he was the one who caused it. Back at the diner, something unexpected happens. Nancy's fingers twitch. She's alive. Bloodied but breathing, she yanks the blade out of herself. Underneath her shirt, we see why. She had wrapped herself in the rotting meat from earlier, creating a crude shield that absorbed just enough of the damage to save her life. Despite her injuries, she crawls to Bobby's lifeless body, holding him as grief overtakes her. But there's no time to lose. She grabs the sheriff's keys and drives away at full speed. Back at Jake's house, he's calling out for Pete, pretending he doesn't already know he's dead. Realizing it's all unraveling, he begins stuffing clothes into a duffel bag. Outside, Nancy staggers from the squad car, knife in hand, dragging herself to his doorstep. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. Jake, suspicious, grabs a hammer before cautiously opening the front door. No one's there, but something's been left behind. Nancy's sticker badge is taped to the door. Before he can react, she emerges silently from behind. She stabs him clean through the neck. Jake gurgles, stunned, as she pulls the knife out and lets him drop. It's over. But Nancy's strength is nearly gone. She stumbles back into the street, collapses, and lies there staring up at the sky. Her mind drifts to a conversation with Tabitha, how she confessed to feeling trapped by life at just 20 years old, unsure of her future, now carrying a child she hadn't planned for. She just wanted to feel like her life meant something. In the final moments, Edward arrives, shaken and desperate. He finds his daughter barely conscious and cradles her, promising that help is coming. Nancy tries to speak. With her last breath, she softly whispers, "My baby." And then, the screen fades to black.